Welcome back to Connie Pearl Psychology. Today we're going somewhere that I think is going to land very close to home for a lot of you. Because I've been thinking about this one for a while, and the more I sat with it, the more I kept thinking about the conversations that I had even in my own personal life with friends, not just in clinical work. The kind of conversations that you have with someone you know, a close friend, over dinner, and they say something like, "I found a name I didn't recognize. He'd been DMing her for 6 months. I had no idea." I can think of so many versions of this story, and I'm sure you can too. What I want to talk about today is something called micro cheating, the hidden digital lives that people build inside of their relationships. The DMs, the encrypted apps, the disappearing messages, the OnlyFans subscriptions that were never mentioned, the Instagram likes at 2 in the morning, the thread of text that they told themselves mean nothing. We are living in an era where it has never been easier to maintain a secret inner life inside of a committed relationship. And yet I want to challenge something today also, because I think the question that we need to ask is not just, why are people doing this? The deeper question is, have we always done this as human beings? Is this who we are? And if it is, what do we do with that? Let's start with the basics. So the term micro-cheating was popularized by an Australian psychologist named Melanie Schilling, who defined it as a series of seemingly small actions that indicate a person is emotionally or physically focused on someone outside of their relationship. And since then, the term has exploded on TikTok, in therapy offices, and late night conversations between friends who are trying to make sense of something that they haven't been able to quite put their finger on just yet. Here's the thing I want you to understand about micro-cheating from the very start. It is not actually defined by the act. Like any betrayal, it's defined by the secrecy, the concealment. Because sending a DM can be entirely innocent, right? Liking someone's post can be entirely innocent. Keeping in touch with an ex even can be, in the right context, if all parties are approving and consenting, can be entirely innocent. What makes something micro-cheating is not the external behavior itself, it is really the intentionality behind it. It's the hiding. It's the awareness that your partner would not be okay with what you're doing and the fact that you've chosen not to tell them. Researchers at the University of Chicago developed what they called the social media infidelity-related behaviors measure. So this is a test, it's a survey that they give to people, and one of the central questions in it is striking in its simplicity. Here it is. It reads, "I would feel uncomfortable if my partner read my messages to others on social networking sites." That's it. That's the line. Not what you said, not who you said it to, but whether or not it would make you feel uncomfortable if your partner saw it. That question is probably one of the most clarifying questions that I can offer you today, because most people who are micro-cheating already kind of know that they are. The discomfort is the data itself. Right. Now is a great time to stop and ask yourself how you feel about that item. You can ask it to yourself. How would you endorse it? I would feel uncomfortable if my partner read my messages to others on social networking sites. Yes or no? I'll leave you to think about that as we continue on with the episode. So what does micro-cheating actually look like? It looks like texting someone that you're attracted to in ways that you would never show your partner. It looks like maintaining a dating profile just to look. It looks like a flirty DM thread that lives in a corner of your Instagram and that your partner has no idea about, right? Or a signal conversation with disappearing messages turned on. A subscription to an OnlyFans account that you're not just watching, but you're also chatting, tipping, and asking for things. It looks like all of those small and daily recalibrations where you manage what your partner sees and doesn't see of your inner world. And before I go further, I kind of want to say something about the spectrum here, because micro-cheating is not a monolith. On one end, you have someone who occasionally finds themselves like lingering on an attractive person's profile and feels guilty about it. That's like one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, you have someone conducting what is essentially parallel emotional relationships entirely hidden for months. Both of these things are probably worth examining to different degrees, but they're not the same thing. The pattern, the concealment, and the investment are what determine the psychological weight behind the action. Let's talk about this idea of OnlyFans, because I think more broadly, the question of digital intimacy is becoming more and more interesting and relevant. Here's what some research actually showed. A 2025 study from the Kinsey Institute found that opinions on digital infidelity are deeply divided amongst people. Nearly half of the people that were surveyed considered a partner sending money or gifts to a cam model as cheating. 1 in 5 said simply watching porn constituted infidelity, and the number was even higher when messaging was involved, when the digital interaction became transactional and personal. And this is kind of the crux of the OnlyFans question psychologically, because there's a meaningful difference between consuming pornography and subscribing to a creator that you message directly, right? There's a clear distinction there. When you're DMing someone on OnlyFans, requesting content or tipping for attention, sharing your desires, you're no longer a passive consumer. You are engaging. You are building something, even briefly, a transactional intimacy. Whether you are paying for someone to focus on you, to respond to you, to make you feel desired in that moment. And while that creator is treating it as commerce, like as a business, the consumer on the other side of the screen may be experiencing something much more emotionally loaded and intimate. The line, as with everything in this territory, is not in the act, it's in the secrecy of the relationship. It's in whether you told your partner or not, whether you would feel comfortable if your partner knew that you were doing this. A couple who openly discusses one partner's OnlyFans subscriptions, who has made a shared decision about what it means within the bounds of their relationship, that is a very different situation to someone who subscribes secretly, clears their browser history, and kind of uses it as a sort of conduit or a path to a separate self. The act may be identical, but the relational breach in the second scenario is entirely different. The betrayal is entirely different. Now let's talk about the tools, because I think that it's worth being honest that certain platforms like Signal, like Telegram, their equivalents, they actually offer someone a lot of opportunity if they are trying to build something secret within the bounds of their relationship. We can take a look at Signal. Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messaging app. Every message is encrypted. There is a disappearing message feature that can be set to auto-delete conversations after any interval you choose. There is a screen security option. The app itself has a lot of concealment. There's minimal tracing. Messages on Signal get deleted and are gone permanently. They don't live in any server. So now, Signal was designed for journalists, activists, people living under authoritarian governments who need to communicate safely. Like, that was genuinely its sort of genesis as a tool. It's an important privacy tool. I'm not here to condemn it, but I am going to say plainly that the same features that make it invaluable to a political dissident make it extraordinarily useful to someone who wants to maintain secret relationships. The fact that the betrayed partners are increasingly finding Signal on their spouse's or partner's phone, like finding it open or finding it there, which is suspicious, is something that therapists working in this space are talking a lot about regularly. And Signal's only one example. There is a whole ecosystem of apps that are designed for privacy and concealment now. Private photo vaults that look like calculators, messaging apps with dual modes. What this means psychologically for the person doing the concealing and for the person who's being deceived is something that we need to take seriously. What the research tells us from Michael Slepian's landmark work at Columbia University, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, is that the burden of secret keeping is not primarily about the effort of concealment in social situations. Most of us rarely find ourselves in the acute moment of having to actively hide something. The real burden of a secret is that we carry it with us everywhere. Our minds return to it involuntarily. Slepian's research actually found that people mind wander to their secrets far more frequently than they themselves are concealing them. And that mind wandering, it's like a constant hum in your psyche of what you're hiding, is actually directly correlated with lower well-being, lower relationship satisfaction, and a progressive erosion of authenticity. So keeping a digital secret life doesn't just harm your partner. The research shows that it actually harms you too. So why does concealment feel so rewarding? This doesn't get talked about a lot, but I want to talk about it. Because if we're going to understand why people build secrets and build hidden digital lives, We have to understand what's happening in the brain when they do. The neuroscience here is well established. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation and the anticipation of reward. This is activated by novelty, by risk, and by the pursuit of something forbidden. Research by Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan has shown that dopamine is fundamentally about wanting rather than getting. It is a drive system. It's not a pleasure system. And what that means practically is that the pursuit of something secret, the illicit DM, the hidden conversation, the double life, activates this dopaminergic energy and wanting system in a way that a familiar, stable, committed relationship simply cannot match. Not because a committed relationship is deficient, but because the brain is wired to want what it doesn't have yet, to seek what is uncertain, what is novel, and just slightly out of reach. What this creates in the context of digital secrecy is something that can be genuinely compulsive also. The notification from the hidden app, the check to see if they've replied, the anticipation, that small rush, and then the behavior repeats and the loop reinforces itself in the brain. The research on sensation seeking shows that dopamine directly regulates approach avoidance behavior in humans around risky and novel stimuli. Some people are more neurologically primed for this kind of sensation seeking, but the capacity is there in all of us. And the digital environment we now live in has essentially built in a delivery mechanism perfectly calibrated to exploit that dopaminergic system. This is not an excuse. I want to be really clear about that. Understanding the neuroscience of why something feels compelling does not mean it's outside of a person's control or responsibility, but it does mean that environment matters. And the environment we are in right now has made micro-cheating not just possible, but frictionless. The secrecy is available at the tap of a screen, and the dopaminergic reward is instant. That combination is really worth understanding if we're going to take a look at what micro-cheating means and why it's so prevalent. Now, here's a question I find genuinely fascinating that kind of reframes everything. Because when we talk about micro-cheating and digital hidden lives, we tend to speak about it as though this is a new problem, like a product of our times, but it's not actually a symptom of the app economy and the attention economy and the dopamine feedback loops on social media. In some ways, yes, it's all of those things, but also, was secrecy really that different 60 years ago? Let me offer you something to sit with. The Kinsey reports published in the early 1950s found that approximately half of married men and a quarter of married women had committed adultery. Half. That was in an era with no smartphones, no DMs, no encrypted apps, no OnlyFans. That was an era of landlines, letter writing, and extraordinary social consequences for discovery, especially for women. And still, half. That's a lot. Let's talk about the men of that era, the men who kept second families, literal second families, in a town just across county lines, in apartments in the same city, at workplaces that their wives never visited. There are documented cases of men who maintained entirely parallel domestic lives, children in both homes, routines in both homes, like for decades, with no digital tools whatsoever. Just compartmentalization, just the oldest psychological defense mechanism in the book, the ability to wall off one part of the self from another, to live in two registers simultaneously without letting them touch. The French sociologist Marie-Carmen Garcia conducted biographical research published in the journal Enfance, Famille, Génération on individuals who maintained regular extramarital relationships for more than 2 years. And what she found was that the double life, this parallel existence, was not simply about desire. It was about a particular relationship to the authentic self. The affair or the parallel life was often experienced as an expression of a truer self, a self the person felt unable to fully bring into their primary relationship. The secrecy was not incidental. It was actually part of the structure of the experience. So here's what I think technology has actually changed. Not the drive, not the human inclination towards secrecy and novelty and this management of a hidden self. That has been with us forever. What technology has changed is the friction associated with these processes. 60 years ago, Maintaining a secret family, a secret partner, required sustained and real world effort. It required physical proximity, logistical coordination, the management of paper trails. The barriers to concealment were quite high, and the consequences of discovery were immediate and social in a way that mattered enormously. Today, you can begin and maintain an emotionally intimate relationship with someone entirely digitally for months or even years with almost no logistical effort at all. The barrier is essentially zero. The DM is always available on your phone. Signal messages disappear, and the discovery, when it comes, is often like a scroll through your partner's phone in a quiet moment. It's not this dramatic unmasking, but it's this like cold and private digital kind of horror. The scale and the ease with which people keep secrets has changed, but the human species has not. And that, I think, should really give us both humility and pause when we think about micro cheating. So, what does this all mean? The fact that we have always been capable of this, that across centuries and cultures and radically different levels of technology, human beings have consistently maintained hidden lives within committed relationships. I don't think the answer is that we're fundamentally faithless as a species. I think the answer is more uncomfortable and more interesting than that. I think we're very complex. And I think that committed monogamy, this promise of exclusive emotional and sexual fidelity to one person for life across decades of change, is probably one of the more demanding psychological undertakings that humans have devised for themselves. That is not an argument against it. I believe in it very deeply. I believe in the depth of what we can build inside of relationships. But I think we do ourselves a profound disservice to act as though it's supposed to be easy. When we act as though desire simply stops at the altar, or when we shame the complexity of human longing rather than honestly engaging with it. What the psychology tells us is that the drive towards novelty and towards feeling seen in new ways, towards the dopaminergic pull of pursuit, these are not aberrations to the human species. They're features of the human brain. What distinguishes a person who acts with integrity from another who builds a hidden digital life is not the absence of those drives. It's what somebody does with them. It's whether they can hold the tension between what they want and what they have committed to actively. Whether they can have the psychological vocabulary to bring their unmet needs into the relationship rather than outsourcing them to a hidden app or a content creator or anything else. And here's where I think the research on secrecy becomes really important, because Slepian's work found that the most psychologically damaging secrets are not the ones that we have to actively conceal. It's the ones that we carry alone, that sit in us, that we return to involuntarily 100 times a day, shaping how we feel about ourselves and about the person that we are deceiving. The hidden digital life does not feel like freedom. The research is clear. It feels like a weight, and over time, it quietly poisons not just the relationship, but the self as well. Are we always going to descend into secrecy as a species? I don't think so. I think we descend into secrecy when we lack the skills, the language, and the relational safety to bring our full selves out into the open. When we fear that honesty will cost us more than concealment, when we have not done the work of understanding what our drives are actually asking for, and whether there are more honest ways to address them. So how do we rise above this inclination towards secrecy? Because this is the question that I want to end on today. Not just what is happening, but how do we understand it and what we do with that understanding. The first thing I want to say is define your relationship explicitly and honestly. One of the most consistent findings in research on digital infidelity is that partners often have dramatically different ideas about what constitutes a betrayal. One partner thinks that liking photos is harmless, and the other experiences it as a violation. One partner thinks that OnlyFans is just a different kind of porn, but the other considers it a form of intimacy that they didn't consent to share. These conversations are uncomfortable. Have them with your partner. They are essential. Negotiating monogamy, what it means, where the lines are, what each person needs to feel safe, is not a sign that your relationship is in trouble. It's a sign that you're taking your relationship seriously. The second thing to ask yourself is about the behavior and to question what's behind the behavior. Because micro cheating, like most forms of infidelity, is rarely only about what it appears to be on the surface. If you find yourself drawn to building something secret, maybe a conversation, a connection, a digital space that only belongs to you, I want to invite you to get curious about that. What is it offering you? Is it excitement? Is it validation? Is it the feeling of being chosen? Escape from a familiarity that has started to feel uncomfortable or that feels like you are invisible. These are all real needs that live inside of us. They deserve real attention. But the way to address them is not to build a secret space, not to hide. It's actually to bring these needs carefully, honestly, and with support, with therapeutic support, couples therapy if needed, into the light of the relationship that you are actually living in. And the third thing to think about for those of you who are on the other side of this, who have discovered a hidden digital life that your partner was maintaining, is to understand that what you are dealing with really is a form of betrayal, even if nothing physical happened with this other person or content creator or anything. Even if it was just messages or just watching something. The research on the psychological impact of emotional infidelity is unambiguous. The harm is real, the trust rupture is significant, and the recovery requires the same amount of honesty and sustained effort that any betrayal does. You are not overreacting. You're responding to something real and important in your relationship. The digital world has made it easier than ever to build a life that your partner cannot see and does not have access to. But the oldest truth about intimate relationships remains exactly what it always has been. What we hide from the people we love, we also hide from ourselves. And the self cannot grow and flourish and be free in the dark, in secrecy. We have always been capable of secrecy. We have always been capable of concealment, of compartmentalization, of the management of the hidden self. Technology did not create that. It just made it faster and smoother and available at any hour of the day. But we have also always been capable of something else, of choosing honesty over comfort, of building relationships that are spacious enough to hold our complexity without requiring us to hide it, of doing the harder and slower and more rewarding work of knowing ourselves and letting ourselves be known in relationship. Micro cheating at its core is a failure of intimacy, not because the person doing it doesn't feel anything, but because they've chosen to feel it somewhere else that their partner cannot see. And the invitation always, in my work, the invitation is back towards visibility, back towards the self, back towards the relationship in reality that deserves your full presence. Thank you for being here with me today. This is a conversation I think we all need to be having. Episodes of Connie Pearl Psychology are released every month. Subscribe to my Substack, conniepearlpsychology.substack.com, to have each one delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're ready to go deeper, join Velvet, the world's first relationship skills training platform, at velvetapp.ai.